I would like to get your feedback on what it's like as GA pilots flying in a privatized system, and any advice you might have for the GA community here in the U.S. on that idea.
Honestly, we don't notice that it's a privatized system at all. It's just a system that works. It's not, the only thing that we actually know and notice is that we get a bill once a year, and my bill for my RV is $68 a year for all air traffic control services, so I don't consider it expensive. It works very well. It's a very modern, safe system. Actually, it's interesting to look at what's privatized and what's not in both countries. The flight services in the United States are privatized. The air traffic control and flight services in Canada are privatized. But you honestly don't notice a difference other than when you dial 1-800-WX-BRIEF in the US, you get, hello, this is Lockheed Martin, rather than this is just the flight service station. And I think the fears in the US about privatization are more to do with who gets control over it than how much it costs. When NavCanada was privatized, they paid $1.2 billion to the government for NavCanada. To me, it would be essential if the US privatized, there would be a big bunch of money that should be transferred to the government from the privatized organization. But to me, it's the governance is the real key. It's inevitable that if you get 9 out of 10 board members who are active airline employees, then it's just not going to work at all. But that absolutely did not happen in Canada. No one on the board of NavCanada is allowed to be actively employed in aviation, period. 3 of the board members are ex-airline executives. 1 is an ex-general aviation executive, and the rest are basically elected from the general public. That'd be more like a city council, if you like. You don't say what was your job before you became a councilman to get a job on the council, and that's essentially how NavCanada is formed.
Has the system in Canada ever prohibited you from going someplace that you wanted to? No, not ever. The only disincentive, which I think is probably true in the US, is if you want to land in a very busy airport. I wouldn't want to fly my RV9 into LaGuardia, but if I flew it into Pearson, I might get my wrist slapped if I hadn't done that on a flight plan. I have flown into one international airport and I got a bill for $14 for the privilege of landing in a busy, large airport. But there's no kind of limitation at all on what private pilots can do in Canada.
Speaking from both perspectives, as an ex-controller and as a pilot, which I still fly, and also on the point of, I also worked for Transport Canada and had to switch over to privatization in the process, where I worked almost another 17 years, I believe it was. So the modernization that happened after we were privatized jumped ahead in leaps and bounds, which never would have happened under the federal bureaucracy, which, as you know, it's very hard for anybody to get anybody to make a decision. So in that respect, the modernization just went ahead in leaps and bounds, and the services too, there was a lot more emphasis put on services. Even though there is a user fee, somewhat of a user fee, I believe the service is much better. And I would urge also, when it comes to governance, that if it's going to happen, that general aviation all get together and ensure that they have proper representation on the Board of Governance.
Yeah, I think the Canadian model is quite a good model to at least look at, to figure out what would be a safe form of governance that would exclude any concern, big money, military, whatever, from taking control of the whole system. And to me, that's the conundrum right there. It's how do you govern it so that it's non-profit, but it stays in business, it's well funded, and can move forward technologically, which is, I think, despite the safety record in the US, it's 3 generations behind in terms of technology at the airports in the US versus Canada. And that's almost exclusively the non-profit privatization of NavCanada that made that possible.
Well, thank you very much for your input.
Aero-TV is brought to you by your Cessna 172 or 177 wants a TrueTrack autopilot, and so do many others. Visit TrueTrackAP.com and get your airplane added to the model list. The TrueTrack autopilot at TrueTrackAP.com.
Build and fly with the most exciting line of kit aircraft on the market, the Sonex Aircraft B models. The B models offer more room and comfort, more fuel, more panel space, more engine choices, and the same great Sonex Aircraft flight characteristics. Learn more at SonexAircraft.com.